Welcome back to the Nitrome retrospective. Last time I made a quick rundown of Nitrome's history and covered their first 35 games, and in this video I'll cover games number 36 through 71. Of course, if you haven't already, you might want to watch part 1 first, otherwise this video might be a little confusing at times because I am going to make a lot of comparisons and references to games I covered in part 1. I also want to preface this video by saying that I can't fully review any game that has a multiplayer mode, as I just don't have anyone to play them with. Sorry about that, but I will still use this icon to indicate if a game has a multiplayer mode, even if I don't end up talking about it in the actual review. Okay, no history lessons this time, maybe later in the video. Let's just get right into it. Mutiny is a tactical battle game where cute little pirates try to kill each other using bombs. This concept is brutal as hell when you stop and think about it. You take control of a pirate crew that opposes a different enemy in every stage. Both parties take turns selecting a crew member as well as an object to use, of which there are multiple types, and as you might expect, the level ends when one of the two parties has been wiped. To be honest, I'm not too fond of this one, but it's probably more because of me than anything else. I just don't like strategy games in general. With that said, if I try to be as objective as I can and only look at the game itself, it's a perfectly fine strategy game. It has way more depth than I expected and gives you a lot of options as to how you can approach each situation, especially in the later levels. After selecting a weapon, you have to aim at your enemy and then fire your weapon, which made the game's slow pace much more bearable for me. This action component also adds a good deal of chaos to every fight. It was pretty hilarious to see how things could go awfully wrong after messing up a single shot. There's also a multiplayer mode that pits two players against each other, which is probably more interesting than fighting against CPUs that sometimes make, let's say, questionable decisions. I legitimately don't have anything bad to say about this one aside from the unescapable enemy turns, which should be illegal, and a few moments where the physics would suddenly decide your existence had to end right here and right now, even when I was clearly aiming my weapon away from my character. Basically, Mutiny is a good strategy game that I don't like because it's a strategy game. I was so excited to talk about this one. You have no idea. Forget about a review. I'm just going to fanboy over this game and you will have to sit through it. Final Ninja is one of the best games on this website. You play as Takeshi, an ex-ninja who left behind his dangerous life in the city for a peaceful one away from noise and civilization. However, Akuma, who was Takeshi's boss, did not agree with this decision and sent out assassins to kill him. Left with no other option but to get rid of Akuma once and for all, Takeshi dons his suit one final time to go on one final mission as the final ninja. And Jesus Christ, this man is going out with a bang. Takeshi is pretty much a futuristic ninja version of Spider-Man. He's armed with 3 tools you'll use to infiltrate Akuma's HQ. Shurikens that can be used to destroy enemies and obstacles, a rope that lets you swing around stages, and a cloak you can use to hide from enemies and security lasers because, yes, this game doesn't completely forget that ninjas are supposed to be stealthy spies rather than ruthless killing machines. Like a lot of platformers I covered in part 1, the level design isn't anything crazy and it doesn't matter because the controls are so goddamn good. Moving around is so freaking fantastic in this game. All three of the mechanics I mentioned allow you to zip through levels, swinging from platform to platform and destroying enemies in the blink of an eye. Your mouse cursor even doubles as a nice way to move the camera around. There was not a single moment where I couldn't see where I was trying to go because I was in control 100% of the time. This game combines so many things I liked in Nitrome's other games. It's like Dangle's good swinging, and Frostbite's grappling hook, and Dirk Valentine's narrative all came together to make a truly great game. I am a sucker for games with good movement, and this is why Final Ninja was, and still is, one of my favorite games on this website. My one tiny little nitpick, it's so tiny, you might even think it's a speck of dust on your screen. That voice at the beginning. It could use some work. One Key is a puzzle game where you must lead this cutie pie through an ancient temple fraught with traps. To do so, you use the spacebar to control various mechanisms in the temple, and that's literally it for the controls. Your character moves automatically, so you really only have to make sure you trigger the mechanisms and traps at the right moment to ensure it stays safe. The game's design is incredibly elegant, because in each and every of the 10 levels I've played, this single mechanic was used brilliantly. Sometimes you have to time your actions in order to avoid taking damage, and other times you encounter traps that gradually block your character's way every time you press the spacebar, forcing you to carefully plan your actions ahead of time and use your presses with parsimony. Each level contains 5 collectible gems that boost your score. I usually don't care about collecting such items if they don't provide any tangible power-up, but for this game, I strongly suggest you go out of your way to get the gems because it's significantly more enjoyable when you solve those additional puzzles. And you get to keep your gems even if you die after collecting them, which makes things even better. I don't even mind just waiting for the tribesmen to progress through the level because the music is way catchier than it has any right to be. This is so unfair! This game is a perfect example of how you don't necessarily need a million mechanics interacting with each other to make a good game. I surmise kids can easily appreciate One Key because it's so simple. People with limited motor skills can easily appreciate this game because they only ever need to press a single key. This game is amazing, and you should definitely try it if you get the chance. Well, Flash is now dead, but let's hope it's been ported to more modern platforms by the time this video comes out. Mallet Mania is a twisty, topsy-turvy sports game where you... yeah, this one doesn't work at all. It seems like browser and/or Flash Player updates just broke this game. The Nitrome.com version soft blocks after starting a game, and the miniclip version doesn't work at all. So there's nothing I can really say about it. Feast your eyes on this gameplay I found on YouTube and your ears on my commentary. You have a mallet. You have to hit a ball, get it into a hole. You have a limited number of shots, and there are gems you can collect. Yeah. It's a real shame this game is already gone because it really doesn't look bad at all. Alas, Flash is old and Flash is dying. Well, it was dying when I wrote this video, now it's just dead, so stuff like this is to be expected, and it's probably not the last time it's going to happen. Spoiler alert, it's not the last time. In the Doghouse is essentially a glorified sliding block puzzle. No offense. Once you form a path with a group of blocks, you can grab the dog bone with your cursor and the dog will then go wherever you place it. The level ends when the dog reaches its dinner. There are different types of rooms you can use to reach your goal. Most rooms can be moved in any direction, but some of them are either limited to one axis or can't be moved at all. There's also a cat that will try to block the dog's way, elevators that allow the dog to move vertically, and doors that are pretty much portals leading to another part of the level. All of these mechanics, and others I haven't mentioned, are used to make for fun puzzles that are pretty cozy. And that sometimes even had me scratching my head for a bit. Some of the levels actually have more than one solution and don't force you to use every block on the screen. In this one, for example, you could start moving some blocks, leave your computer, get a degree in astrophysics, recalculate the mass of the entire universe, flip these stairs so that you can use them to go down, and finally, reach the food. Or you can move a few blocks around and make a straight path to the exit. It's another puzzle game that manages to achieve a lot with very little, and I know I've already said that, but something about this game just feels so cozy. I don't know, maybe it's the relaxing music. Maybe it's the sleepy evening aesthetic. Every time I play this game, I just want to snuggle up in bed with my blanket and drink some hot chocolate. It's a good game for distressed, anxious minds, and after an explosive 2020, that's more or less everyone. Numbskull is a puzzle game, another one, where you must get a skeleton's head back to its body by rotating blocks and groups of blocks. Metal blocks, they can't be moved. Linked blocks, they have to be moved together. And the pumpkins, they have a vendetta against you for some reason. I'll cut straight to the chase. I found this game very boring. This game seemingly comes from a parallel universe where Nitrome had the same general ideas they had for In the Doghouse and managed to butcher the execution. For the 25 stages I've played, I just kind of messed with blocks until I could nudge them where I wanted them to be. There's just too many levels I completed without really paying attention to what I was doing. And to be clear, it wasn't every stage that I absent-mindedly completed like that. There are some levels that had me stuck for some time, levels that forced me to come up with a plan, especially level 20. That was hard as hell. But yeah, I'm not going to start adding a bunch of fluff to this review. Just play In the Doghouse, okay? Let's pretend this one doesn't exist. Bomba. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this properly. Bomba? Bomba? I don't know. This game is a mouse avoider in which you must touch every star in a given level to complete it. You control a teeny tiny character that also happens to be the most fragile thing in the world. If you touch a wall, you die. If you touch an enemy, you die. If you touch this green moss, you die. Aside from power-ups and stars, touching anything will instantly kill you and send you back to the beginning of the stage or the last star you touched. I am clearly not cut out for this kind of challenge because this game drove me up the wall, and it just keeps on getting more painful. You eventually get bombs you can use to destroy the green moss, and if you get hit by the resulting debris, you die. Then there are water sections, because everyone loves water sections, and if you run out of oxygen, you die. Then you get timed bombs, and if you run out of time before you drop them, you die. I feel like a 5-year-old for saying this, but this game is just too hard for me. I still played half of it though, and after an extremely frustrating 42 minutes of gameplay, I can say without a shadow of a doubt that I am not recommending this game, and that I would frankly rather go through Halo 1's horrible library level again than play this game. I disliked it that much. Flip Side is a futuristic racing game where you drive a car that can defy gravity and cling to any surface in any direction as long as you first gain enough momentum to do so, which is almost never going to happen due to this game being an absolute mess. This entire game is ruined by a single decision I cannot agree with: the CPUs. You can either face off against another human player or play against 3 CPUs. Then you pick a level, and if you manage to finish first, you get to unlock the next one. But in single player mode, your opponents will be slamming you with all their might. All the freaking time. This game is giving me intense war flashbacks from Tanked Up, pun unintended by the way, which I panned in part 1 for interrupting you all the time and making it near impossible to complete tracks. Winning a race is nothing more than a crapshoot. The one lucky player who happens to get ahead of the pack is almost always guaranteed to win because they're not going to get hit by a bunch of furious drivers. And if you're not that player, you lose the race and it's back to the beginning. I lost count of how many times I had to restart a level, not because of my own mistakes, but because everyone rammed right into me for the entire race. The single player mode is a series of dice rolls at best and an unplayable, infuriating mess at worst, and god damn it, it breaks my heart because it didn't have to be like this. This game didn't need CPUs to be fun. It would be so much more enjoyable if it could just be you versus the game. Just a series of time trials where you unlock more levels by beating a part-time. You can even have a taste of what it would have been like by firing up the 2-player mode and playing on your own. And let me tell you, it's liberating. Unfortunately, it's not a good long-term solution because you lose half of your screen real estate if you do that. You know, I recall playing this when I was, I don't know, 7, 8 years old, and I'm appalled at how much worse it is than in my memories. In my mind, this game was a fast sci-fi racing game that was intense and that kept you on the edge of your seat, and maybe they were going for that. The resemblance between Flipside's logo and that of the Wipeout games is not lost on me, and they're pretty similar in concept. Nostalgia is a weird thing, and I can't believe I am so angry and disappointed in an old Flash game that you probably won't even be able to play when this video gets published. I don't know how to end this review, honestly. Next. Oh, talk about going all out with the music. Alright. Toxic 2 is a sequel to Toxic, and I find it pretty good. The game seemingly takes place right after the end of its predecessor and has you play as the same character after they have destroyed the first game's factory, only to see the entire world being taken over by machines. Your objective is the exact same as last time. Use different types of bombs to destroy robots and reach the exit to complete a stage. Even though they are very similar, I find this game to be more exciting than the first one simply because it has more stuff. It's a little hard to describe, but Toxic 1's levels had you mostly use your bombs to destroy walls, with pure platforming taking a backseat. Toxic 2, on the other hand, focuses much more heavily on gimmicks and platforming, with wall destruction taking a backseat. And when I compare the two games like that, I find it easier to understand why I preferred this one. Since you spend more time platforming and destroying robots than slowly waiting for your bombs to blow up, I do more stuff and am therefore not as bored. I've complained about less than ideal controls more than once, and I'm afraid I'll have to do that again. I don't know what happened since Final Ninja, but they're significantly worse here. Your character controls like the entire stage is covered in butter, and while your floaty moon jumps make it easier to reach platforms, you better get used to them because it's the only kind of jump you can do. A lot of 2D platformers will have your character make a small jump if you tap the jump button and a higher one if you hold it, but Toxic 2 only lets you do the latter. Again, Final Ninja gave you fine control over your jumps, so why is that absent from this game? Am I missing something? Beyond the changes made to level design, Toxic 2 adds secret levels that can be accessed via alternate exits. Boss stages also make their debut. I only fought the first one in stage 10, and I don't know if I just suck at the game or something, but it was kind of really hard. It takes an eternity and a half to defeat it and requires some pretty tight timing to hit it with your bombs. To me, this is a bit much for a first boss battle. So, Toxic 2, it's pretty good. It's better than the first game. I still prefer the music from the other one though, that's iconic. Fat Cat is a shoot 'em up in which you control a fat cat and an owl to mow down legions of bad guys. I'm serious, this game literally calls the enemies bad guys. The last time I played a Nitrome shoot 'em up, my impressions were not great, to say the least. This is undoubtedly one of the worst, if not the worst, Nitrome game I've played so far. Thankfully, Fat Cat picks up the slack by being significantly more exciting to play. The owl, which is controlled using the mouse, does most of the work and can shoot projectiles, collect power-ups, interact with objects, and even wipe away enemy fire. So if your owl can do so much, why does the Fat Cat even exist? Well, unlike the owl, the Fat Cat can take damage, and if it gets hit 3 times or gets crushed, the game is over and it's back to the beginning of the stage. But the Fat Cat also has a trick up its sleeve. The Megaton Burp. What is a Megaton Burp, you ask? Well, if you collect enough food scattered around the level, you get to do this. This attack is an absolute force to be reckoned with, and its limited nature makes it all the more satisfying to unleash. I like the fact that there's a little bit of strategy that goes into completing levels and that the game is more than mindless shooting. When I encountered the first boss, I first went, how in the world am I supposed to do this? But after following the advice given at the beginning of the level, I decided to look for a spot where the purple bullets couldn't hit me, and would you look at that, I am no longer getting creamed. All in all, Fat Cat manages to add a nice layer of depth to a classic genre by splitting your attention between 2 characters. It's better than nanobots. Frostbite 2 is a sequel to Frostbite. If you've been watching since part 1, you probably know the kind of additions Nitrome makes to its sequels. New enemies, new types of stages, new mechanics, and boss stages. I also have a theory that your character drank an entire warehouse of Red Bull between Thin Ice and this game because that man is absurdly fast compared to Frostbite 1. It was unexpected to say the least, but the added speed ended up being a big part of why I enjoyed this game. The controls are not as floaty as the original, but they're still so imprecise that platforming became more difficult than it should have been in the later stages, and I kept the most important thing for the end. They brought back my favorite sound effect. Other than that, I'm not too sure of what to say. What I said pretty much sums up my feelings on this game, and I'd rather not waste your time by adding useless fluff to this review, so I'll just end it here. Just like the other one, Frostbite 2 is like cheese pizza. It's very good, and you wouldn't be against more, but it's nothing to write home about. Icebreaker is a puzzle game where you have to free Vikings who somehow managed to get trapped in ice. To do so, you have to cut it using your mouse cursor so they can land on their battleship and have their captain smash their frosty prison to bits. Just make sure the crew members don't fall in the lake below or it's an instant game over. Unlike the other puzzle games I've covered so far, Icebreaker makes you think with physics. The only way to make progress is to consider the weight and properties of the objects around you, making the puzzle solving even more freeform than in the doghouse. Some puzzles are the shut up, there's only one solution and if you can't figure it out then too bad type, and others are more the hello, this is point A, please go to point B type. I don't care how you do it, just go to point B.
Right, yeah, there you go.
And I'm happy to see Icebreaker lean much more heavily towards the latter category because I personally prefer puzzles like that. You feel like an absolute Einstein when you can complete a stage in a way that was clearly not intended by the developer. This is certainly an interesting direction to take for puzzle design, and I'm curious to see where Nitrome takes these ideas next because I had a grand old time with this game. Pixel Pop is a rhythm game where you complete a series of challenges to the beat of the music, and for the first time since Feed Me, we have a new art style that is inspired by an NES game complete with a Commodore 64 style opening rather than the SNES/GBA mishmash that Nitrome usually goes for. I'm pleased to see them try something new and interesting. Too bad the game that goes with this new art style is... After reading its description, I was expecting some catchy chiptune and satisfying levels that I would want to play over and over again, but every minigame I played, be it Godzilla smashing tanks or a UFO adopting cows and farmers, kind of misses the mark. Even when I managed to get a hold of the rhythm, I could never really get in the zone where you forget you're even playing a game. There's sometimes a tiny delay, it's really small, but I swear to God, it makes all the difference in the world, and as a result, the game is quote-unquote looser. But even if that delay wasn't there, it wouldn't help much because the music, I don't like it. It's just average chiptune music, and having good music is kinda sorta really important in a rhythm game. Pixel Pop isn't terrible, but if you forgive the pun, it just cannot seem to hit its notes right, no matter how hard it tries. Flash Cat, which has absolutely nothing to do with Fat Cat, is a racing platformer where you have to use various power-ups like a mega jump or a bug projectile to get to the end of each track. There are also obstacles and enemies because no Nitrome game is complete without that, am I right? I just talked about Nitrome going for a different art style with Pixel Pop, but never mind that. What do you mean you're doing 3D now? And aside from the camera occasionally shoving its face in the road, it works shockingly well. This game is more than visuals too. Your cat's insect is made to be this uncontrollable beast that's going at breakneck speed, and every time you make a turn the camera swerves left and right, and every time you boost the whole screen starts shaking violently. It's like you're going faster than sound itself. These might sound like very unknowing effects, but I thought they added a lot of intensity and juice to the game, and man did I need good game feel after Pixel Pop. Twin Shot is a game where you play as cutie, bubbly cat angels defeating enemies in an ancient cloud city. This game is boring as hell. All you do is mindlessly shoot enemies to unlock the next stage. Your cat uses a bow and arrow to do that, and there is at least a teeny tiny bit of depth with your weapon. Every time you press the shoot button, there's a small delay before you shoot, and just like every Nitrome platformer so far, aside from Final Ninja, you cannot control the height of your jumps, so you often have to time your shots if you want to hit more targets than your average stormtrooper. Your arrows also stay lodged in walls for a few seconds, allowing you to use them as temporary platforms. I still got a hold of those mechanics rather quickly, and it was only a matter of time before, like I said at the top of this review, I got bored. Though from its icon, its title screen, and even the game's title itself, Twin Shot, it's not terribly hard to guess this game is better played in co-op mode as a laid-back experience two people can have a conversation over. So I don't think this game is very interesting, but your mileage may vary if you play the co-op mode. Mirror Image is a game where you use teleportation to reach the end of levels without falling into the vortex below or hitting an enemy. You know these math problems where you have to create a mirrored version of a shape? This game is that, but on the fly. When you draw lines with your mouse cursor, your little warlock will teleport to the other side of that line with both your previous position and your new position being at the same distance from that mirror line. And at first I was prepared to say what I've said so many times up until now, that this game doesn't have enough to it and that it's boring and yada yada yada. But then something interesting happened in level 5. They took off the training wheels and removed the guide that shows you where your character is going to land, leaving you with a small line that only shows the direction you will take. If I said Icebreaker makes you think in physics, this game makes you think in geometry, because now you have to get the angle right and draw your line exactly between your current position and the place you want to reach, which isn't as hard as you might think, considering a lot of the scenery cleverly doubles as landmarks you can use to aid you in that task. The game even introduces freaking mirrors that reflect your teleports. Oh, and this is going to sound weird, but I also want to give a shout out to the tutorials. On top of teaching you how the game works, they also include some explanations as to what's happening in the game world. Demons are more numerous in abandoned areas. Locked doors are locked to keep invaders out of the village. Which village? I don't know, but these little details help the game feel more like a living, breathing world and less like a collection of tiles and sprites. Glassworks is a game in which Kapowski, the main character, gets fired for the stupidest reason ever, making gloves that allow him to be more productive at his glass cleaning job. To prove that his invention is useless, his boss challenges him to climb the glassworks using his gloves. Like I have so many times before, I'm going to play Spot the Inspiration, and this time it's Super Mario World climbing sections but extended into a whole game. You'll spend your time climbing glass and switching between its two sides, avoiding instant death lasers and encountering an alarming number of identical looking bearded men who really should be the ones getting fired. The cleaner has left his work unfinished, and I am far too busy doing my job. You mean reading the journal? That's your job? Some levels also have a ton of birds that are hell-bent on covering you in poop. Getting hit by bird poop is certainly nasty, but to the point of hurting you? How weak can Kapowski be to get injured by literal crap? And that's about the extent of what I have to say on this one. It's alright. Not bad, not good, just okay. Yes. here we are, again. Icebreaker the Red Clan is a sequel to Icebreaker. As the title suggests, you're now trying to free Vikings with red beards instead of ones with grey beards. Other than that, almost everything from the art to the music is carried from the first game, to the point the game won't even tell you how mechanics that were introduced in Icebreaker 1 work. You're really expected to have played the previous game before you move on to this one. In the 20 levels I've played, 2 new mechanics were introduced: rocks that can be attached to any surface and ice that can float. Both of them led to puzzles that were sometimes quite challenging, but always very well designed and fun to solve. Everything I said in my Icebreaker 1 review is still valid here. If you liked the first game, you're going to like this one because it's more of an expansion than a fully fledged sequel. I surmise this is why the game's icon says 1.2 rather than 2. Rust Yard is a puzzle game where you must get a robot through a desolate rust yard. It's like a junk yard, I guess, but rustier. You use your mouse cursor to interact with various mechanisms around the environment. These include, but are not limited to, buttons, boxes, levers, platforms, and even other robots. You have absolutely no control over your robot. It automatically goes forward and jumps when it reaches a ledge. If you've been paying attention to my reviews so far, you'll notice that this game is extremely similar to One Key. You could consider it to be some kind of spiritual successor of sorts. However, I don't like this game nearly as much as One Key because all of the elegance I raved about for that game is gone here. And in its place, there's just a bunch of mechanics that never really come together to make for compelling puzzles. When you first see these boxes, the game suggests you use them to make stairs, and in the 14 stages I've played, the only other way they're used is to make walls. When you see fans for the first time, the game suggests you spin the nearby wheel to activate them and carry your robot to the other side, and you never use the fans in another way. What I just described happens a lot in this game. The tools at your disposal are used in the same ways so many times that the game becomes way too easy. Go back to One Key and finish it 100%. You'll have more fun doing that than playing this game.
Final Ninja Zero.
Welp, so much for having better voice acting.
Final Ninja Zero
is, as the title suggests, a prequel that takes place 40 years before Final Ninja and covers Takeshi's first mission as a rookie ninja. And the intro is a giant wall of text. I would have preferred some nice art like the first game, but it's not the end of the world. Oh really? You really expect me to read all this? Literally less than a minute into the game, you are already confronted to one of its biggest problems: words. Since Takeshi is still working for Kuma, he's not alone like the first game. You regularly receive messages from Lady Snowfox, a spy Akuma sent to infiltrate the enemy HQ, and these messages are huge. I like a good story in a video game, and I've been pushing for more in-depth stories in Nitrome games, but this is a lot. A lot. Be careful what you wish for, I guess. Takeshi's arsenal is unchanged from the first game. You can still shoot shurikens, swing around levels, wall jump, and go into stealth mode, which leads me to my second gripe with this game: the smooth platforming. It's gone. And it's been replaced by stealth, a lot of it. One of the new enemies introduced is this drone that will tear you to shreds if it detects you, so you have to stealth your way past it. There are also these robots which are clones of the scientist Takeshi is trying to take down, and if they spot you, they sound the alert and a ton of enemies show up. So you have to stealth your way past them, sometimes in pretty funny ways too. The bigger emphasis on stealth makes sense. Like I said in my review of the first game, ninjas aren't killing machines, they are spies. People aren't supposed to see them, and yet I preferred spending most of my time doing this rather than doing this. This review might have been a bit of a downer, but don't let me convince you that this game is bad. It is not. Hell, it still has some of those nice platforming sections here and there, just in very small quantities, so I still recommend this game. It just doesn't appeal to my personal taste as much as its predecessor. Power Up is a puzzle game where you have to connect two transformers to each other by arranging metal blocks, and there are a lot of different blocks. I was surprised to see new mechanics still being introduced after playing half of this game. You have regular blocks, wooden blocks, magnetic blocks, honey blocks, monster blocks, banana blocks that tame the monster blocks, balloon blocks, and there's more. I could go on like this for a long time. Like the Icebreaker games, you must think in physics if you want to get anywhere. Wobbly, finicky physics, that is. I don't know how to feel about those. On one hand, you have a lot of freedom as to how you want to approach each puzzle. I am not good at this game, but I managed to get away with the jankiest, most bootleg builds that couldn't possibly have been what the developers intended, and that's great. On the other hand, I sometimes had to fight against the physics to complete stages. Those balloon blocks I talked about, they are not your friends. That level was hard as hell because they would constantly cause my bridge to collapse, forcing me to start over. And the blocks don't freeze when you grab them with your cursor. Instead, it acts like some kind of center of rotation within the block, and the block spins around and wobbles awkwardly, which makes it more difficult to place blocks the way you intended. In spite of my complaints, Power Up is still a solid puzzle game if you can stomach its physics. Cosmic Cannon is a game where you must keep a ball in the air as long as possible by firing more balls into it. Every time you shoot a ball into another one, your score increases and you're just trying to get the highest score possible. The end. It's not a bad way to waste your time, I guess. Nitrome is Nitrome though, so they still manage to slip in some references which don't count towards your score for some reason. Maybe Hot Air Guy is too sacred or something to be assigned a number. Droplets is a game in which you must get little rabbits, or droplets as the game calls them, to land on score zones and beat the target score at any cost. And I really do mean any cost. You can kill every single one of your droplets, and if you beat the target score, you still win. Every level gives you a set number of droplets that you can drag and drop wherever you want. Once you let go of the mouse button, your droplet will gracefully float in the sky. You can also click on the mouse button again to close the droplet's ears, causing it to fall faster. It's an alright game. You drop your little guys, you open and close their ears depending on how much you want wind to carry them, though it was honestly more fun to drop them into bombs and witness the resulting chaos. The art in this game looks a little off. The menus have low-res pixel art, but the game is medium-res, but the backgrounds are low-res, but this piece of music sounds like chiptune. But this one doesn't. It's like the game couldn't decide whether it wanted to be like an NES game or an SNES game, so it just went for some weird mix of the two. It's odd. This game is odd. This game is just okay, and you shouldn't play it. Okay, before I cover the next game, I want to spend some time talking about a very important feature that debuted with it, Nitrome Touchy. Let me drop a huge shout out to the Nitrome wiki and the good people over there, because their article on Touchy is extremely detailed and most of the following information comes from that article or one of its sources. You might already have been in the kind of situation where you want to do some local co-op or some local versus with friends or siblings, and then you have to get a bunch of chairs and everyone is stuck with 5% of the keyboard and your hands hurt, and god damn it, I didn't lose because I was bad, the controls just messed me up, okay? Aiming to solve that problem, Nitrome partnered with a company named Brass Monkey to develop a solution. Brass Monkey specialized in software that turned mobile devices into controllers for browser games. The result of this partnership was Nitrome Touchy, a mobile app that allowed you to use your phone as a controller and added a full screen mode to various Nitrome games. To take advantage of that, you would download the app and make sure both your phone and your computer were on the same Wi-Fi network. After that, you simply selected a compatible game from Nitrome's website and it was off to the races, provided you owned the premium version of the app. In its initial iOS release on October 31st, 2012, Touchy was compatible with 10 games and only one of them was free to play. To gain access to the other games and any future compatible games, users had to pay a one-time fee of $4.99. Users could also download Brass Monkey's app or visit their website to purchase Brass coins, with 1,000 coins being worth 10 cents and games costing 10,000 coins on the app and 5,000 coins on the website. Well, the website's description leads me to believe that, but I find it a little unclear, so maybe I'm wrong. I honestly don't understand why anyone would want to go the Brass Monkey route, because on top of making the entire process more complicated by adding more steps, it's a horrible deal. On Brass Monkey, $5 would get you 5 games, whereas on Touchy, $5 would get you all 9 games plus any games that would be added in the future. And that last part is really important because Touchy got updated and improved many times over the years. A mix of new games being released with Touchy integration from the start and older games being updated to include Touchy integration eventually brought the total number of compatible games to 30. Some of them even supported motion controls or included an exclusive 4-player mode. Did you notice something off throughout this section of the video? I only used the past tense because Touchy is dead. Actually, it died over 5 years ago. On March 30th, 2015, Nitrome published a blog post announcing that Touchy had been removed from both the App Store and the Google Play Store, and that it would be completely shut down 3 months later, even for the people who already had the app. The biggest reason cited was that the tech powering the app just didn't work anymore. Remember Brass Monkey, the developers Nitrome collaborated with to launch Touchy, and the ones who had the terrible payment model? They were the ones running the servers that made the connection between your computer and your phone, until they created a new company named Infrared 5 and left their old servers behind. No servers, no connection, no Touchy. Nitrome considered updating Touchy to use new servers, but they ran into a big problem that leads me to the second reason behind Touchy's demise: money. Making such substantial changes to the app would have been expensive. So expensive that it was just not worth it because there weren't that many Touchy users in the first place. Quote, Touchy never made a lot of money for Nitrome, but we were happy to keep it running at this point as it did still make some and Brass Monkey handled the servers. There was no reason to not keep it running until this happened. End quote. And so Nitrome Touchy ceased to function on June 30th, 2015, taking 4-player modes, full-screen games, and motion controls with it. So if in my future reviews you see this icon, or anything similar, remember that it's nothing more than a relic of a distant past.
Oh, my statue! Double edge!
Is a beat-em-up set in ancient Greece, where you play as a warrior going on a rampage for reasons. This game is bad. It's one of those games where you mash the attack button until your enemies die and you don't have to think about much else. Your default sword is completely and utterly busted. Its range is so ridiculous that you can stunlock nearly every enemy in the game, and I don't mind games like that. I don't always want a challenge. Sometimes I just play games to unwind. But for this to work, you would need some strong animation, some strong visual effects and sound effects to emphasize how powerful your character is. But your hits feel so puny, be it using your sword or trident or an axe, except for the hammer. That thing always hits hard. I'll concede that since this game was meant to be played with a phone as a controller, Nitrome didn't want to make it too complex, so maybe that's why it's so simple. At the end of every other stage, you have to face a boss. The first fight against King Midas was uninteresting, and the second one against Talos was an absolute chore because throwing a bunch of enemies at your face in the middle of a boss battle just makes it more annoying instead of making it harder. And the music is not my thing at all. Congratulations, Double Edged. You managed to be one of the only Nitrome games that I truly, really dislike. I never want to play this game again. Castle Corp is a strategy game where two castleware companies are competing for success. Yes, castleware companies. It's like a weird alternate universe where kings are CEOs and knights work for their companies. This game's concept is so weird and I love it so much. Each level has you picking and sending knights to fight against the rival company. To do so, you simply drop them on a platform. After that, they automatically walk along their path. If they encounter an enemy, they'll do their best to fend them off, and once you're done with a knight, you can send them flying towards a location of your choice, which will often allow you to defeat enemies in a single hit. Defeat every enemy on screen to proceed to the next level. You can also free up knights that will join you in later stages and collect money you can use to buy items in the shop. This game is such a joy to play. You're trying to complete stages while collecting as much money as possible, and the best way to do that is to figure out which items will allow you to defeat the largest number of enemies. And if your build is optimal enough, you'll have enough leftover knights to collect money scattered throughout each stage, which in turn lets you buy more items for the next stage. You're getting rewarded for coming up with good strategies. And I'm a big fan of this game's humor too. The descriptions for your items are all written like sales pitches. Bullied at night school? Tired of always losing the princess? Try our new patented bulk up shake and you'll be inadequate no more. Just one serving will make you able to hit harder and last longer. Huh. Even the pause menu is nice to you. The game is paused. Nothing will happen, so answer that call, get on with some work, or just have a cup of tea. Wholesome. It's so nice to get a game like this after the disaster that was Double Edged, and I did not expect to like it this much. I just wish the text wasn't so small. I could barely read it on a 24-inch 1080p monitor with the page zoomed at 190%, let alone 100%. Parasite is a platformer where you play as a parasite whose goal is to destroy everything. The planet, the universe, it doesn't give a damn. You're playing as a villain this time. But this is far from the oddest thing about this game. Your parasite drives this flying ship with the tackiest horn sound ever and a pepperoni pizza seat. You can take over most of the creatures you encounter by jumping on them, and every time you do, the host starts puking green slime and the music turns all evil and stuff. If you touch Happy Gas while controlling a creature, it blows up and you automatically lose control. And if you press the action key when the parasite isn't controlling another creature, it just starts farting? What is this game? What the hell is this game? I don't understand how this came to exist. And it's not even a bad game. It's a very by the numbers platformer. It even has checkpoints for once. That's a nice thing. But this game is so bizarre. Some games are good, others are bad. Parasite is just Parasite. Rock Kitty is a game where you play as a cat in space that ricochets on planets to reach its ship. I have two things to say about this game. One, it puts a lot of emphasis on score. The levels are extremely short and straightforward, save for a few annoying mechanics that shouldn't have been in the game. There are a ton of fish bones, goldfish, score platforms, and cows that you can collect to increase your score. It's not really my thing, but if you like score attack games, more power to you. And two, the sound effect that plays when your cat bounces around is way too loud. It drove me up the wall minutes after I started playing the game. It should have been quieter, or it should have been a different sound altogether. And before you tell me that I can just mute the sound effects, that's not an excuse. Games are meant to be played with sound effects, and it's a red flag if I feel tempted to mute them. It's fine. This game is fine. Nebula is a game in which you play as a starlet training to become a red giant. Your starlet is almost always moving and bouncing on walls and ceilings, so the only way to control its trajectory is to draw lines with your cursor, and that's a solid 95% of your battle with this game. You can either hold down the mouse button and draw your lines as the starlet makes its way through the level, or just make quick lines that steer it in the right direction. Either way, you're bound to lose control at some point, and once that happens, it's a little difficult to regain it because you have to draw your line at the right time. Too early and it'll disappear, and too late and your starlet will miss it entirely. Then there are enemies and hazards that make the whole experience more frustrating. Your starlet can stick to this galactic jelly, which allows your fingers and your wrist to take a little break. Until you reach this level where you have to move blocks with your cursor, but clicking on the mouse button launches your starlet, and good luck preventing it from flying straight into spikes. The controls are messed up is one of the most telling symptoms of acute saltiness, but seriously, the controls are messed up, and it ruined this game for me. I get what they were going for. In a parallel universe where you controlled the starlets using the arrow keys, I would have played this game and said, it's okay, it's just fine. I would much rather see a game trying to be novel and failing than a game being formulaic and succeeding. Cave Chaos is a platformer where you are in the most horrible cave network ever, and have to make your way to the end of each level as it gradually gets built by the strongest bats ever, and eventually collapses bit by bit. And when I say bit by bit, I mean it. Judging by the title and the only tutorial sign in the entire game, I expected every stage to be a frantic run for your life. I would constantly outpace the level's construction, either killing me or forcing me to slow down and wait for it to catch up. But you're not the only thing that can slow you down, because sometimes these freaky white monsters will drop down and try to do the same. This leads me to one of the things I like about this game. The monsters can't kill you. They can cause you to fall off and die, but they can't kill you, and I'm thankful for that. Having to worry about both the level collapsing and enemies trying to kill me would just frustrate the hell out of me, so I'm glad they didn't go with that. Thanks, Nitrome. There's also a co-op mode, but like I said at the top of this video, I can't play it, though I assume things would just get even more chaotic with two people trying to escape the cave. It's called Cave Chaos for a reason. Graveyard Shift is an on-rail shooter where you blast your way through hordes of zombies and monsters. This is mainly a game of quick reaction times and snap decisions. You want to shoot enemies as soon as they show up on screen to prevent them from shooting projectiles at you, but if you do let that happen, you can hold space to block them with your shield. Though it's best to use it in a pinch because its durability is limited. This idea may sound a little basic and perhaps even annoying to some of you, but this game should not be taken lightly. Things start ramping up after some time, and this game can and will kill you if you're not quick enough. You can also collect power-ups that will help you take out enemies faster. Outside of regenerative items, you can have a sword that chops enemies in one hit, or grenades that annihilate everything in the general area they hit. Both are a delight to use and give you a nice power trip for a minute or two. Even your default gun is a lot of fun to use. I had so much fun playing this game that I wanted to keep on playing even after reaching the halfway point where I usually stop. And that's a really good sign. Cold Storage is a game in which you have to help a Yeti make its way out of cold storage by swinging and subsequently jumping from pole to pole. You can gain some serious height if you time your jumps properly. Before I say anything else, this has to be the darkest opening yet. I feel a pang in my chest every time I see this pile of frozen Yetis. There are different types of poles. You can use regular poles, action poles that let you kill enemies, icy poles that are slippery, and rusty poles that fall apart if you stay on them for a few seconds. And then you swing, and jump, and swing, and jump. Cheese pizza. I like cheese pizza. Icebreaker Gathering is a sequel to Icebreaker Red Clan, which itself is a sequel to Icebreaker, making this the first Nitrome IP to have 3 mainline games. It's the same winning formula seen in the other 2 games. You have to free frozen Vikings by cutting ice and getting them on their battleship. You have to think in physics to reach the goal, and these physics can sometimes screw you over. And the game assumes you've played its predecessors again because it doesn't explain the mechanics that return from the other games. Icebreaker Gathering still makes some incremental changes. The biggest one is right in the game's title. Instead of playing as a single clan like 1 and 2 or 1.1 and 1.2, this game gathers 5 different Viking clans, and each of them has 8 levels featuring different mechanics, both new and old. You could see this like an Icebreaker Ultimate or something. Everyone is here. Another interesting addition is this button. I'm stuck. It appears in the pause menu if you fail or restart a level more than 3 times in a row. If you're a puzzle purist, the mere thought of a game just giving away its solutions if you start having trouble likely sounds like heresy. I never felt the need to press it because I'm too much of a samurai to do so, and the game is not all that difficult to be honest, but I checked it out for the purposes of this review and it turns out to be a whole lot smarter than I first thought. If you press the button, the game doesn't tell you how to beat the level, it instead lets you skip it entirely, but only if you can't manage to complete it 24 hours after pressing the button. The game won't let you skip levels on a whim. Of course, you could always bypass this by watching a guide on YouTube or something, but this added friction could encourage a stuck player to just try a couple more times before giving up. It's good stuff. The Icebreaker games are some of my favorites on the entire website, and as far as IPs go, this is about as good as it gets. Avalanche is a game where a penguin is trying to escape an avalanche, which has to be sentient in some kind of way because my god, that is a lot of rubber banding. The game ends when your character gets consumed by the avalanche, but it'll slow way down when it gets close to you, and it'll speed way up when it gets far away from you. What you really have to look out for are the various obstacles that can slow you down and the terrain itself, which can screw you over if you don't pay attention to the minimap in the top right corner. You can also collect rocket boosts that make you go incredibly fast. So you're controlling a character that's basically always going forward, whose only viable action is to jump, and that has to run away from a hazard that can kill it in one hit. Where have I seen that before? I won't be too hard on this game because it came out before app stores got saturated with endless runners, but I will say that I got very bored playing it and that I'm happy I get to move on to the next game, especially because that game happens to be one of my favorites. Rubble Trouble New York is a game where you play as a demolition crew tackling various jobs around the Big Apple. Every time you destroy a building using one of the various tools at your disposal, you earn money and you have to exceed the target amount to complete a level. It's not just all-out chaos though. It's actually quite the opposite. Some levels include neighboring buildings that can't be destroyed under any circumstance. If you hit those even a single time, the entire thing collapses, causing you to fail the job instantly. There are also stages where workers will somehow find themselves on top of a large structure, and if they take too much damage, it's game over. This is a puzzle game first and foremost, and while some levels will require tighter timing with your tools, it's mostly about making a loose plan in your head and going for that. Aside from the first few levels, no stage I played could be cleared by randomly destroying stuff. My single complaint for this game is something that I've criticized so many times you might as well consider it bullying at this point. The physics. Yes, again. They work well enough for the most part, but sometimes they just decide you're their worst enemy for no reason. I mean, look at this. Isn't this enough to make this guy fall on the lower platform? It's ridiculous. Rubble Trouble New York is a game of organized chaos, and I had an absolute blast with it. Skywire VIP is not a sequel to Skywire 2. It's a trivia game that just happens to use Skywire's art style. You're shown a bunch of pop culture characters and celebrities, and sometimes Nitrome characters in the Skywire style, and have to guess who they are or which franchise they come from before you run out of time. If you have trouble figuring it out, you can press the small question mark spotlight to get a hint, and if you still can't figure it out, it's game over. There's nothing else you can do. I eventually hit a wall and game overed, so I quit the game, and when I restarted, I was shown the exact same questions in the exact same order, because as it turns out, they are not randomized. If you don't know the answer to a question and want to play the entire game, you have no choice but to look it up on Google and continue like that. This was obviously just a mini-game to tide fans over until the next main game came out, and I think it's a nice little distraction. Unfortunately, the lack of randomization or even just a limited number of skips kill any appeal this game could have had beyond the first playthrough. Blast RPG is, as the title suggests, an RPG where you play as a young knight being blasted out of a cannon and fighting enemies in the air. Beat the target distance and you get to move on to the next stage. Each level begins with you picking an angle and timing your mouse click to shoot your character with maximum power. Once he's in the air, he'll start fighting any enemy he touches. You don't have any control over when your character attacks or whether the attack is going to succeed. And let me tell you, that guy is not good at attacking enemies. You can, however, steer the character by pointing in the direction where you want him to go. If he manages to kill the monster, he'll gain some extra height, which will let him get closer to the target distance. The only exception being those bootleg Tinkerbells who just get mad at you and slap you in the back. Once your character loses all of his momentum and lands, the game is over and a fanfare that borders on plagiarism plays, even if you didn't beat the target distance. After that, you can use your XP to increase your stats or spend your hard-earned gold in the shop. This guy looks so clueless. He's all like, well, I don't know what I'm doing here, but pick an item, I guess. Surprisingly enough, those items ended up being the most important part of the game. If you're starting to lose height and there are no enemies in sight, use a rocket boost. If you want to deal more damage to an enemy, have a gander at the element triangle and take advantage of its weakness. While Blast RPG wasn't the most impressive game ever, it was an enjoyable game, and I'm happy Nitrome went for something new. Well, they almost always go for something new, but I mean new-er. And before I stop, I kept the best part of this game for the end. If you run out of health and fail the level, you get to see one of the most dramatic game over screens ever. I will take this as my cue to end the video. Once again, I am well aware it was very long, even longer than the other one actually, and I would like to thank you for watching it in its entirety. In part 3, we'll be looking at the next 35 Nitrome games. See you then.